Ladies and gentlemen, what you call happiness is not something you find in a book, a bank balance, or even in another person's smile. It is not a trophy you win. It is the most intimate experience within you, and yet most people spend their whole lives looking for it outside. If you close your eyes and just breathe, no memory, no future, just this breath, you'll see, there's no reason to suffer. Happiness is not some peak moment. It is your natural state if only you stop disturbing it. And look at the science. We say serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, these are the chemicals of happiness. But where are they produced? Not in the Himalayas, not in a palace, right here. In your own body, the factory of bliss is within you. But people have lost the remote control to their own chemistry. Your mind, this magnificent instrument, can be heaven or hell depending on how you hold it. If it becomes a compulsive replay of past regrets and future fears, even paradise will feel like punishment. But if you learn to sit here, aware and alive, then even a simple breeze on your face will feel like a celebration. So, happiness is not something you do, it is something you become. You don't need a perfect job, perfect partner or perfect weather, you need clarity, you need inner balance. Once your interiority is in harmony, the world can't mess with your joy. Don't try to be happy, just stop messing yourself up. A child is happy by default. You were like that too. Somewhere along the way you learn misery. Now unlearn. If you can simply sit, breathe and smile without reason, you have cracked the science of happiness, because joy is not a destination. It is the fragrance of a life well lived in awareness. When we speak of happiness, most people are talking about a certain kind of emotional high, a pleasantness of experience that they believe must be caused by something outside of them. A person, a place, a possession or a position, as though the sun must rise in the sky to feel light within, as though a flower must bloom outside for fragrance to rise within. But the truth is, happiness is not a souvenir you bring back from a vacation, nor is it a prize at the end of a long struggle. It is not an applause you earn or a certificate you hang on a wall. It is something far more fundamental, far more intrinsic, something that happens not because of life's arrangements but in spite of them. Because what you call happiness is not an achievement, it is your original state of being. The problem is not that joy is far away, the problem is you wandered too far from it. You see, the nature of the human mechanism is such that the entire sensory experience, whether of joy or sorrow, of success or failure, of love or longing, is generated from within. And yet we are endlessly trying to fix the world outside to feel better inside. We are always adjusting the furniture of our lives, but never noticing that the discomfort is coming from the way we are sitting within ourselves, not from the structure around us. And as long as we continue to believe that happiness lies in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next change of weather or scenery, we will remain beggars sitting on a treasure chest. Thirsty people complaining beside a flowing river, unaware that what we seek is already within our reach. The real science of inner joy lies not in the rearrangement of the world, but in the realignment of oneself, because how you experience life, whether in delight or despair, is happening only within the boundaries of your own body and mind, and no matter what you have around you. If you don't have mastery over your inner chemistry, you will not know joy in any enduring sense, for the world cannot permanently please a restless mind or a chaotic emotion. And chasing happiness through acquisition is like trying to quench thirst by painting pictures of water. It may distract you, but it won't nourish you. If you look at a child, before he is taught to be anxious, before she is taught to be ambitious, you will see that joy is their default state, that they can laugh without reason, dance without music, smile at the wind and be delighted by nothing at all. And this is not childishness, this is the purity of being in touch with what is naturally present, before the layers of conditioning, comparison and confusion are added, before the mind becomes a marketplace of desires and disappointments. So happiness is not something to be created, it is something to be uncovered. But the adult mind, so intoxicated by its own intelligence, forgets the simple truth that happiness is not something that happens to you, it is something that happens from you. That unless you learn to engineer your inner space, unless you become aware of the workings of your mind and the tendencies of your energy, you will keep running and running like a machine that forgot to stop, chasing shadows on the wall, infusing motion with progress and achievement with fulfillment, and one day you will wonder why, after all this running, there is still a hollow echo inside. So what needs to happen is not more doing, but more seeing, not more struggle, but more stillness, not more ambition, but more awareness. Because in the silence of perception, in the gentle clarity of simply being here, without agenda. You begin to realize that your existence itself is the most miraculous thing. And when this is seen not as a thought but as a living experience, suddenly everything begins to flower from within. Not because the world changed, but because you cease to resist it, to demand it, cease to expect happiness from it. And this shift from seeking to seeing, from doing to being, is not a philosophy, it is not a moral code, it is a science of inner life. A method as precise any physical law, because if you align your body, mind, energy and emotions in a certain way, joy becomes not a mood, but your very atmosphere, not a fleeting event, but your natural vibration. And this is not about becoming indifferent to the world, but about becoming independent of it, not rejecting the pleasures of life, but not being enslaved by them either. So in the end, happiness is not at the top of a mountain or the bottom of a bottle. It is not in the applause of the crowd or the affection of a partner. It is not a reaction to life. It is the basis of life when lived in awareness. It is a fragrance that rises from a life that is inwardly settled. And the moment you turn inward, not with frustration but with fascination, not with escape but with exploration, you'll find that joy was never a destination, it was always your home. When we speak of emotions, joy, sorrow, love, anger, fear, we are not speaking of things that fall from the sky or rise from the earth. We are speaking of internal phenomena that are entirely produced by the body and mind working in synchrony or in distortion. And science has shown what sages always hinted at, that your experience is not dictated by the world but by the chemicals released in your system, whether it is dopamine giving you the thrill of achievement, or serotonin creating a sense of peace, or oxytocin binding you in affection, or cortisol tightening you in stress. It is all being brewed inside your own chemistry lab, which means the power to shape experience is not in the hands of the world, but in the wisdom of your inner alignment. So if you understand this simple but profound fact, you would stop blaming the outside for how you feel on the inside, because the person you are angry with is not holding your adrenaline levels. The one who rejected you is not flooding your system with sadness. And the praise you received did not inject happiness into your veins. No, all of that happened within, through your own neurobiology, through the delicate dance of neurons and hormones, through the whisper of your brain to your body and back again, a dance so intimate that even a thought, even a memory, even a fear of tomorrow can shift your inner chemistry like the turn of a switch. But the tragedy is that most people do not know where the switch is. They do not know that their emotions are not just reactions, but habits, not just feelings, but biochemical patterns that repeat and reinforce themselves like grooves in a record. And once you get used to sadness, your body begins to prefer it. Once you get addicted to anger, it becomes your familiar comfort. And once you identify with fear, it keeps releasing itself without the need for danger, which means if you do not become conscious of what is happening within you will be nothing more than a puppet dancing to the tune of your own chemical soup. So, emotional intelligence is not just about managing moods or improving communication, it is about becoming the master of your inner factory, learning how your breath, your posture, your diet, and your focus all influence the chemicals your brain chooses to release at any given moment. And this is not imagination, it is not mysticism, it is pure science. When you sit calmly, breathe deeply, and think thoughts of gratitude, your brain does not wait for approval. It rewards you instantly with oxytocin and serotonin, and yet we think we must achieve something huge, change the whole world for a little joy to arrive. But if your chemistry is the source of your emotion, then your body is the temple of your experience, and unless you keep this temple clean, still and consciously handled, you will continue to feel as though the world is shaking you, when in reality it is your inner machinery that is in tremble. So the path to joy is not to beg from others, but to activate the right biochemistry within, to stop outsourcing what is fundamentally internal, to stop seeking peace from chaos and start cultivating the inner balance that produces clarity, strength and sweetness. So every time you feel blissful, know that it was your own intelligence at work, that your system gave you the gift of pleasant chemistry, and every time you feel low, lost, it is not the world punishing you, but your own body crying out for alignment. And this means you are not a victim of emotion, but a creator. And this creation is happening continuously, moment to moment. So you can either learn to conduct it with awareness, like a musician plays a sacred instrument, or you can let it happen by accident like a child pressing random keys in the dark. And when you understand this, you begin to see that meditation is not just about silence, it is about self-regulation, that yogic practices are not rituals, they are technologies to optimize. this inner chemical factor to produce joy, not as a reaction to external pleasures, but as a stable fragrance of your own being. And when that becomes your reality, life ceases to be a pendulum between highs and lows. It becomes a smooth river where even the rapids feel like dance, because your emotional response is no longer dictated by the moment, but by your mastery over your inner landscape. So whether you feel like you are in heaven or hell, remember it is not the location but the secretion, not the circumstance but the chemical configuration. Then joy is not something you pursue, it is something you engineer, something you sustain, something you become. Not because the world became beautiful, but because you turned inward and learned to hold the control panel of your human experience in your own steady, conscious hands. When you look at this body and think of it merely as flesh and bones, you miss the most intricate technology on the planet. For this body is not just a sack of organs, it is a symphony of intelligence, a live expression of consciousness itself. And what you think in your mind does not remain locked in your head, it spills into your chemistry, it becomes your posture, your breath, your heartbeat, your digestion, your very way of sitting and walking. Which means every thought is a signal, every emotion is a wave. Every idea is an instruction to the body and every cell is listening to you far more attentively than the people around you ever will. And yet we have come to a place where we treat the body like a vehicle and the mind like its driver, not realizing that there is no separation, that what you call body and what you call mind are not two things, but two ends of the same thread. And if you pull one, the other responds. If you nourish one, the other flourishes. If you abuse one, the other suffers. So when you are anxious in your mind, your stomach tightens, your breath shortens, your shoulders tense. And when you are joyful, your entire physiology relaxes. Your energy moves differently. Your presence becomes fragrant without you needing to say a word. So when we say healing, we are not talking about fixing a part, we are talking about aligning the whole. We are talking about recognizing that the body carries your mind's stories in its tissues, that your muscles remember the fears your mind tried to forget, that your breath carries the rhythm of your unspoken emotions, and that unless you bring awareness to both together, you may heal a symptom but never the source, you may silence the noise but not the echo. And true well-being will continue to remain just out of reach like a dream you almost remembered. This is why ancient wisdom never treated body and mind as separate. This is why the breath, that bridge between the seen and unseen, was always the starting point, because breath is not just air, it is intelligence. It is the link, the messenger, the gentle cord, tying the physical to the mental, the gross to the subtle. And if you learn to breathe consciously, you can calm the mind. If you study the mind, you can ease the body, and this simple practice, if done with awareness, becomes not a technique but a doorway to inner balance and silent power. But most people live as though the mind is just for thinking and the body just for doing, not realizing that the way you think can change the way your cells behave, that chronic negative emotion becomes chronic inflammation, that unresolved inner conflict becomes outer disease. And this is not mysticism, this is measurable, this is medicine, the science of psychosomatics, which shows that there is no thought without consequence, no feeling without a fingerprint on the flesh. And if you ignore this connection, you may live but you will never thrive, you may function but you will never be free. So, instead of treating the mind like a monkey to tame or the body like a machine to run, it is time we start treating them both as sacred expressions of life. To sit and observe how a single moment of gratitude changes your heart rate, how a few minutes of stillness your immune function, how laughter shifts your chemistry, how presence soothes your nerves. And in this observation, you will come to see that health is not a goal, it is a consequence. Peace is not an escape, it is your nature when both your body and mind are in alignment with each other and with existence. And when this alignment begins to deepen, and your thoughts and breath and posture and energy all begin to flow in harmony, not in tension, when the inner clutter begins to clear, then you will know what it means to feel light without reason, to feel stable without support, to feel joyful without stimulus. And this is not something exotic or elite, this is your birthright. This is the design of your being when left undisturbed by excessive thought and unconscious living. When the mind becomes still and the body becomes… when intelligence flows without interference and life begins to dance again. So do not think of the mind and body as separate instruments you must master one after the other. See them as the same music played at different frequencies. And the more you tune into them with care, with clarity, with conscious breath and gentle awareness, you will not need to fix yourself anymore, Vura. You will simply start functioning at your full potential. not as a burden machine, but as a luminous expression of life, whole and vibrant. For when body and mind are no longer in conflict, peace is not a choice, it is simply the way you are. To live consciously is not to live carefully or cautiously. It is not to tiptoe through life trying to avoid mistakes. It is to live with your eyes open, not just the physical eyes that show you the world, but the inner eyes that allow you to see yourself, to observe the way you think, the way you feel, the way you respond, the way you exist moment to moment. Because unconscious living means you are reacting from habit, from memory, from conditioning, from wounds you did not choose and beliefs you never questioned. And conscious living means you pause long enough to notice all this, to see that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your patterns, but the space in which all of that is happening. And this space, this awareness, is not something you have to create, it is not something you manufacture with effort, it is already here. It is the most essential part of you, it is the silent witness that was present even when you were a child and is still here now, watching the body grow, watching the mind wander, watching the world change, and yet most people are so busy chasing life that they forget to live it. So busy trying to become something that they forget they already are. Busy fixing the outside that they never turn inward and ask the most fundamental question: who is it that is experiencing all this? When you live without awareness, life becomes mechanical. Days pass without depth, actions become automatic. And you are simply running on the program installed in you by parents, teachers, society, television, fear, and unexamined memory. But when you start living consciously, even the smallest act becomes rich. Drinking water becomes a sacred experience. Walking becomes a meditation. Listening becomes communion. Silence becomes food. But as an aware being who is no longer lost in thoughts, no longer trapped in regrets, no longer busy trying to escape the present moment. And that is the key, the present moment. Because all awareness is rooted here and now, not in yesterday's stories or tomorrow's fantasies. And unless you are here, truly here, you cannot know joy, you cannot know peace, you cannot know yourself. You will only know a restless mind always trying to go somewhere, always trying to become something, always trying to add more to itself in the desperate hope that more will eventually feel like enough. But it never does, because the more you seek without, the further you drift from the quiet fullness that was always within. So conscious living is not about doing something new. It is about doing everything with newness, about bringing the light of awareness to the places within you that were hidden in habit, forgotten in noise, buried in repetition. And when you start to observe without judgment, without conclusion, when you begin to just witness the way your breath moves, the way your thoughts arise, the way emotions bloom and fade like weather patterns, something subtle but powerful begins to shift, and that shift is the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom from the unconscious bondage to your own inner chaos. And that freedom brings clarity, not the clarity of certainty, but the clarity of presence, the clarity that knows what needs to be done without being overwhelmed. The clarity that can feel pain without drowning in it, the clarity that can act without reacting, the clarity that doesn't need drama to feel alive. And in that clarity, you stop living by momentum and start living by intention. You stop existing out of compulsion and start flowing out of awareness. And this simple transformation, from reaction to response, from distraction to attention, is what makes an ordinary life extraordinary. Because the truth is, life is not asking you to be perfect. Life is only asking you to be present. And when you are present, you realize that joy is not hidden in the next achievement. Peace is not waiting at the end of a long road. Love is not locked away in someone else's heart. All of it is already here, wrapped inside this very breath, folded into this moment like a secret waiting to be opened. And it is awareness that gives you the key, not as a philosophy or technique, but as a living experience that grows deeper each time you remember to return to what is already here. So conscious living is not something you do once in a while when you sit cross-legged or light a candle or take a break from your life. It is life itself lived with eyes that see, ears that listen, hands that feel, and a heart that does not rush to explain or control but simply receives. Receives the miracle of being alive, receives the mystery of each breath, receives the truth that there is nowhere else to go. Because when you are aware, fully aware, even for a moment, you realize you have already arrived. To speak of psychological bondages, to speak of the invisible chains we wear every, not around our wrists or ankles, but around our thoughts, around our memories, around the silent beliefs we never chose but still carry like sacred truths. Focus from the moment we begin to form identity We begin to form attachments to names, to forms, to opinions, to experiences both sweet and bitter. And these become the framework of the prison we call personality. And so we live inside our own mind as if it is the whole world reacting not to life as it is, but to life as it is, but to life as we have defined it, judge it, colored it with our past. And these bondages are not placed upon us by life itself, but by our own unconscious agreement. By the way, we hold on to hurt as identity, success as self-worth, fear as protection, anger as strength, and in doing so, we build layer upon layer upon layer of mental residue, cluttering the inner space with assumptions, with expectations, with wounds that we polish instead of healing, with fears that we decorate instead of dissolving. And then we wonder why peace is far, why love feels why silence is uncomfortable, not realizing it is not the world that keeps us trapped, but the loops of thought we never dared to question. So to break psychological bondage is not to fight the mind, but to see through it, to become so aware of your inner patterns that they begin to unravel on their own, like shadows that disappear when the sun rises. Because the moment you look at your fear without flinching, at your belief without needing it to be true, at your emotion without becoming it, in that moment, freedom is not something to earn, it is something that is revealed, because truth was never missing. It was just buried under the noise of thought, under the identity you mistook for your being. But most people are so deeply entangled in their own mental constructs that even their suffering feels familiar, even their anxiety feels like home. And so when you try to step out, when you try to live without drama, without conflict, without the emotional roller coaster, the mind pulls you back, saying this peace is unfamiliar, this stillness is not safe. And unless you learn to sit through that discomfort without running away, without grabbing another distraction, another story, another blame, you will never know what it means to simply be, untouched, unbound, unbroken. And the root of all bondage is this illusion that you are your thought, that you are your history, that you are the voice in your head narrating the world constantly. But when you begin to sit still and look inward, not to analyze, but to observe, not to control, but to allow, you start seeing that every thought is just a visitor, every emotion just a cloud, every memory just a ripple, and you, the real you, are the sky itself, vast and unaffected, and in that realization there is no chain strong enough to bind you. Because the one who was bound was never real to begin with, only a shadow dancing on the wall of your awareness. So breaking free is not about adding more, it is about shedding what is false, not about becoming better, but about becoming empty of illusion, of mental noise, of false needs and second-hand truths. Because true liberation is not a change in your situation, it is a shift in your perception. And once you stop clinging to the voice of the mind like it is your master, you realize it was only a tool, useful, sharp, but dangerous when left unobserved. And from that point on, you don't need to suppress it or silence it. You simply stop being hypnotized by it. And that's when you begin to live, not as a conditioned personality repeating yesterday's fears and tomorrow's hopes, but as presence itself, aware and alive in each breath, no longer pulled by regret or pushed by ambition, no longer stuck in the cage of self-image or haunted by someone's opinion. Because you have seen through the bars, and seeing through is the same as stepping through. Because once you realize the cage was mental, there is no door to unlock, only a waking up from a dream that was never real to begin with. So this is the path, not of escape but of encounter, not of fixing the mind, but of freeing yourself from its grip, not of fighting your thoughts, but of watching them dissolve in the light of awareness. And the more you live from that space uncluttered, undistracted, undivided, the more you understand that breaking psychological bondage is not a final destination but a continuous deepening into the simplicity of being, into the effortless freedom of now, into the joy of knowing that nothing owns you unless you agree to carry it. When we speak of happiness, we often speak of it as though it is something to be earned, something to be gained after a journey, something that will descend upon us only when the conditions of our life match the checklists in our minds. But the simple and often uncomfortable truth is that happiness is not something you achieve, but something you uncover, something that exists not at the end of striving, but at the beginning of stillness. Because beneath all the noise of desires and fears and distractions and stories, happiness is not a product of what happens. It is the nature of who you are when you stop being everything you're not. And the tragedy is not that happiness is rare, but that most people are so busy looking outside for it that they never pause to notice it is already flowing from within, waiting not to be manufactured, but to be remembered, not to be forced, but to be allowed. And it is in this misunderstanding that we chase endlessly. We chase people and places and possessions thinking they will bring us what we already possess, and in the process of chasing, we move further and further from the stillness where happiness resides untouched by circumstance. Because happiness is not the reaction to comfort or success. It is not the result of validation or attention. It is the fragrance of presence, the echo of inner alignment, the natural expression of a being that is in harmony with itself. And you do not have to earn it any more than the sun has to earn the right to shine. You simply have to stop covering it up with layers of anxiety and comparison and mental noise, and the constant itch to become something more than you are. And when you sit silently and stop negotiating with the moment, when you stop waiting for things to go your way and just meet life as it is without grasping or resisting, without dramatizing or dulling, something soft begins to arise, something unexplainable, yet undeniable, a sense of ease, a quiet joy, a silent contentment that needs no cause and seeks no audience. And that is the natural state trying to speak through you, the original rhythm of your being before the world taught you to be restless. So the work is not to build happiness like a house with bricks of achievement and walls of control. The work is to peel away the unnecessary, to reach the grip on what you think must happen, to let go of the belief that your peace depends on anything outside you. Shedding in that gentle shedding, you begin to feel a spaciousness, a lightness, a return to something you once knew before you had words, something you felt before you had wounds, something that was always there but buried beneath the layers of becoming. And when you realize that the nature of existence itself is joy, not because life is always pleasure, always alive, then even pain does not steal your happiness. It simply passes through it like a wave moves through water without altering the depth. Because happiness in its purest form is not an emotion, not a spike of feeling or excitement, but a foundation of being, a deep yes to life as it is, a resting in the now without needing the next. So in this way, happiness is not something fragile that breaks when the world is unkind. It is something unshakable that holds even sadness within it, like the sky holds storms. And the more you taste this natural happiness, the less you look for it. The less you try to trade your peace for fleeting pleasures, the less you feel the need to explain your joy to anyone, because it is no longer based on a reason, it is based on reality. And once you begin to live from this place, where happiness is not pursued but lived, not demanded but received, not faked but felt, then everything becomes different, not because the world changed, but because you are no longer chasing the sun in the sky, while forgetting that the same light lives within you, and in that remembering, you become whole again, not by becoming more, but by simply being as you are, which was always and will always be enough.